Hello, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for being here, everyone. I'm going to give it about a minute for folks to join. We see a few folks popping up. Just want to make sure that the chat is working. So let me just make sure it's enabled. All right. I think it's enabled. Could you go ahead and type in the chat? Just give me a quick hello and where are you joining us from as I promote my friend Nicole to panelist? Hi, Shuba. Thanks for being here. Hey, Rob from Illinois. Thank you. We got India in the house, North Carolina, Nashville, Naples. Hey, Mark. Good to see you. Christine, thank you for joining us in the evening in UK. Hello from Arizona. Hey, Brianna. Good to see you. Awesome. A lot of folks. Hey, Nicole, are you there?
I'm here. It's not letting me start my video for some reason. Can you hear me though?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Let me just make sure if on my end I'm able to.
It says the
I'll make
host
you.
stopped it,
I'll,
so there must be
I'll
a,
make you a co-host. Maybe that gives you a bit
let's
more permission, and that should work.
look at
All
that.
right. Mark, I'll look to see if I can save the chat. Let me see where I can do that. But all right, so we're recording, so we are live. So welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. This is our how to sell without feeling pushy webinar. Now, Nicole and I do this from time to time, just as a way to gift to you just some of our experiences and some knowledge and some ideas for you to be able to look at the way that you approach your business, your conversations, and just life altogether, and really just reframe and maybe look at it from different perspectives so that you can show up to be more successful in life, in business, in your conversations, and ultimately have better outcomes and feel good about it. Right? We're going to talk a lot about feelings. We're also going to talk about what drives those feelings that inspire the actions that we should take, but then the source of truth that helps us, have the right belief systems, the right thinking process to be able to fuel the feeling and the action taking and the motivation to take the right action. So if you're meeting us for the first time, I'm Carlos Garcia and I am a sales coach, founder of Exceed Sales, and with me is my partner Nicole Cramer. She's also been a sales coach and former math teacher and former top sales performer in her world, and I'll let her share a little bit about herself. And we're both exactly what to say certified guides. So we met in this mentorship program where we are we teach a methodology of how to use specific, precise language and how to be intentional in conversations so you can be more persuasive and influential. You can show up the right way without in any way being manipulative. It's 100% with integrity, 100% to be authentically yourself, but just really how to be more precise in how you communicate so that you can lead your customers or potential customers to making the right decisions and feeling good about making those decisions. But hey, Nicole, thanks for being here. Anything you want to add?
Hey, Carlos, I'm going to say the same thing I used to say when I was a math teacher. I like to nerd out in the numbers when I was a math teacher so that I could help my students learn what they needed to learn so that they can go graduate high school because they didn't want to nerd out on math like I did. Carlos and I are your sales nerds. Let us nerd out on all the sales stuff, the skills that you need, the books, the podcasts. We are so rehearsed in all of that. We are so experienced with it that we want to pour into you because we know you don't want to be sales experts. You want to be the expert in the thing that you're already the expert in. You just want to make more sales so you can help more people. And that's what we're here to deliver to you is how can you have more influence so that more of your conversations are going the way that you want to? And Carlos and I will be your sales nerds to help you figure all that out. Without being pushy.
Absolutely.
I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is we take action based on our feelings. And if we feel pushy, we're not going to do as much asking. But if we can get in the right mindset, we're going to get a lot more of the outcomes we want. So here's what we're going to talk about today. As you can see, we've got a few different topics that are really going to be beneficial for you so that by the end of today, you know what you need to think and feel and what you can go take action on to create more of these results. So first, we're going to tell you how selling is serving. And you've got to get yourself in that mindset. I was sharing with Carlos, when I was a basketball player, we did warm-ups, we played music, we got ourselves going before we went and played in the game because we had to be in the right headspace. Same thing for all of you here today. We want you in the right headspace because if you're not thinking the right thoughts, you're not going to be taking the right action. So the second thing we're going to cover is asking the right questions. One of the biggest secrets to not being pushy is to ask better questions. And we're going to talk to you about how to do that and give you some insight on how you can do it better. And then handling objections gracefully. They're going to happen. They're going to be there. Objections are a part of conversations. The beauty is objections are really just buying signals. And when we know how to handle them gracefully and we feel prepared to respond to them, things go in the direction we want them to a lot more often. And then one of the questions that we get asked all the time, how do I communicate my value? We're going to cover that here today so that you know exactly what you need to do so that someone feels the value that you can offer them by working with you. And then last but not least, close with confidence. It's what we all want, right? We want to close more of the opportunities that we have right in front of us. How do we do that competently and confidently? And that's how we're going to end today, is to teach you how to do that. So knowing all of that, who's ready to get started with a really fun game that we want you to play with us? By really fun game, we want you to answer in the chat. What would you use to describe? What word would you use to describe a stereotypical salesperson? Like when you think sales, when you think salesperson, stereotypically, what do you think? Share with us in the chat an adjective. Yep, I see slimy, pushy.
Fun is interesting. It's the first time I hear fun when you're stereotypical. Okay.
I like it. Cringy, that's a good one, Christine. Cliche, yes, Teresa, cliche. Annoying, Britton says annoying. Yeah, aren't they? They don't leave you alone. Yes, all of these are descriptions. Low self-respect, there we go. A hunter, self-serving, gimmicky. Ooh, that's an interesting one. Very true, right? Gimmicky. And I know a lot of you are here because you saw maybe one of the promo posts that Carlos and I shared about the difference between influence and manipulation. We're going to talk about that today too, because a lot of times those are things that people can get a little confused. They're like, am I being manipulative or am I actually being influential? We're going to talk about that today. Salesy, boisterous, animated, dramatic. Yep, these are all good ones. So now I want you to play the game of share a word you would describe a professional salesperson with. So we've just described a stereotypical salesperson. How would you describe a professional salesperson? Good listener, integrity, consultative. Yep. What else? Humble, a good one. Educational, yes. Empathetic, great one, Mike. Confident and a genuine. Ooh, that's a good word. Genuine human. Receptive, authentic and genuine. Interested, understanding. You know what's interesting to me is that there's one common denominator between those two things that we just had you describe. And the one common denominator was that both times you were describing a salesperson. In both of those instances, you were describing a salesperson. One was what we would consider a stereotypical salesperson. The other is what we would call a professional salesperson. And the good news is you get to decide which of those two you show up as in your business. And you already have all the descriptors of what that person would act like. They'd be consultative, they'd be humble, they'd be empathetic, they'd be educational, they'd be interested, not interesting, they'd be confident, they'd be a genuine human being. So the good news is we already know who we have to be that version of a salesperson. So what that means is salespeople aren't bad. It's just the perception that is. And the perception that's the most important place for you to start is your own perception, your own thoughts about a salesperson and who you are. And Carlos has some really valuable tools that he's going to share with you about how to get your mindset in the right place so that you are showing up as that professional salesperson. And we've got to have that right first before we go take any action in getting into conversations with people. So Carlos, why don't you share with us a little bit about what's important with mindset and how can we make sure we're in the right one?
Yeah, and I just want to add a quick note before we do move into that is that all we did in that little exercise is we changed one word. And just with the change of one word, you changed all the words. And which is why we love so much this concept of understanding when you change your words, you change your world. And so if you show up more intentional in understanding what words you're using not only in the way that you show up for your customer conversations, but how you show up for yourself, the way you talk to yourself, to say that the things that you say to yourself. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what is some language that we can leverage to help us elevate our mindset and maybe challenge potentially some of the things that could be limiting our potential, right? Our potential to do things that might feel uncomfortable, or to do things that are outside of our the zone of what we typically do, or maybe because our existing belief systems could have a specific perception of what that could be seen as from the outside perspective, right? Without evidence. So, first question I challenge you all to ask yourselves is, what could be the story that we tell ourselves when you show up to a sales conversation, right? Are we showing up potentially prejudging, what the customer needs or doesn't need before we even started asking questions, right? Are we already in solve mode, thinking I already know what they need and but haven't even asked them one question? And that tends to be kind of a default mechanism, especially if we offer the same product or service for over and over again. When we kind of get into this habit of going through the same questions over and over again, right? Like, what do you want to accomplish, and how much do you need it for, and when do you need it, and who else makes the decisions? Like, we tend to sort of get comfortable with assuming that because the majority of all of our customers, give you these same answers, we sort of start prejudging already what we think they need. So the challenge would be here is how can you challenge yourself to show up to sales conversations or to potential customer conversations without any assumptions? Like, just clear the board, like blank. Assume this is your first conversation ever with any potential customer, without any prejudgments or pre-assumptions of what your typical potential customers, and that will help you stay curious for a lot longer and uncover different things that will take you away from some of these pitfalls that we might fall into. And so first understand, like, what are some of the prejudgments that we might be making coming into these conversations, and could we just challenge those and instead show up 100% curious, just a blank canvas, and assume you know nothing, right? Now we want to prepare for the conversation. We want to try to prepare what kind of questions we want to ask, which is something that Nicole will talk about. But the other piece is, what stories are we telling ourselves about us? Like, I don't, and that's what I want to talk about. These are some of the things that, in my experience, and Nicole could attest to this, that when folks come to us saying, I want to get better at selling, but I just feel like I don't want to come off as salesy. These are some of the things that we hear when we ask them, well, why aren't you doing that? Like, why aren't you asking? Why aren't you following up? Why aren't you communicating the price in the first call? Whatever that thing is, right? Like, oh, I'm afraid to, or I'm afraid that they'll reject me, or I feel like I'm bothering them, or they'll think that I'm greedy, right? Or you just self-qualify. I'm not a good salesperson, right? Or I'm afraid to sell. No, and the truth is what you say to yourself is what you're going to believe. And the only way you can combat that, the only way you can challenge that, is by looking for the evidence, right? What evidence do you have that that's true? So always ask yourself, what evidence do you have that that's true? And if only you had one bad experience, because sometimes through one negative, traumatic experience, right? You never want to go through that uncomfortable feeling again. You then just generally say that because of this one bad experience, then everything becomes the reality or the truth of that. So we have to hold ourselves back. And again, we want to look through things rather than through self-judgment or judgment of others or judgment of the circumstance, instead looking at it through curiosity. Nicole, what would you add to this?
Well, first of all, I think it's funny because when you were saying that, what I was thinking of, it's like if you went to a buffet and one of the things you tried on the buffet was bad, and then you're like, I'm never going back to that buffet again. Nothing there is good, right? Like, we want to be careful that one bad experience isn't going to create these limiting beliefs. Just like you can see on the screen, I don't want to bother them. They'll think I'm only after their money. I'm not good at selling. I'm afraid they'll say no. Like, chances are you've had some bad experiences with sales, buying things in the past, but chances are you've had some really good ones too. And when we're focusing on just the negative, right, what you focus on is where your energy flows. And if your energy is in all of these thoughts right here, you're not going to take action. And something Carlos and I were talking about earlier that I think is really interesting is what happens is we get ourselves into a really good conversation and we see an opportunity, but we're so afraid of being pushy. We're so afraid of actually asking if that person wants or needs help that we decide, even though we're so close to the finish line, we decide, you know what? I don't want to feel pushy. I don't want to feel aggressive. So I'm just going to go back to the start with somebody brand new. I'm going to put all my effort and energy into finding somebody brand new just to what? Just to bring them back to that exact same right before you cross the finish line, decide that you're, and then that's going to be a cycle over and over and over again. And you're never actually completing what it is that you really want to complete. And it's really just coming down to one thing. It's how you feel about it. And that's why this piece is so important that Carlos is talking about is how you feel determines what actions you take.
Right. And so just know that this is the actual definition of mindset. There are 3 or 4 different definitions, but I brought the 2 that I feel like were the most important to know. Is that this is mindset is all about how we see ourselves, right? And then how we see ourselves help us build what beliefs we have about ourselves, about others, about the world around us. It determines our worldview, right? So if we can influence probably the biggest person that we need to influence ever in our lives is always starts and ends with ourselves. It's the first conversation we have is with ourselves when we wake up, and the last conversation we have in the day is with ourselves. If we can control just that, we can at least influence that, then we can influence the outcomes of the external things, right? Like conversations with others, how we approach business, how we approach getting new clients, how we approach rejection, how we approach obstacles, how we approach objections. And these are all things that lead to that. And so there's this triangle that there's this concept in the world of belief and mindset, and it's a cycle that starts with what we think leads to how we feel, then how we feel leads to how we act, right? So if we can influence our thinking to help us at least feel better about, what it is, that challenge or a task or whatever that obstacle it is that we're trying to overcome, then it'll hopefully drive the behavior that we want. The challenge that I want to share with you, and you probably heard this from a lot of folks that do a lot of coaching, is that movement is so important. And I want you to self-reflect to the last day that you sat all day doing nothing, doom scrolling, and how you felt doing nothing but just thinking your way through an entire day, right? You felt unproductive, probably. You felt like you were watching other people living their best lives and you weren't doing a thing. You didn't move a finger. And you felt even less motivated to go to the gym or less motivated to do anything. You were probably even stuck by doing analysis paralysis, right? Because you weren't moving. You were just thinking your way through whatever the heck was going on. What I challenge you to do is instead turn off the phone. This is not even about sales, right? Just turn off the phone and go to the gym. Go run for 30 minutes. What happens is your endorphins, your entire mind mentally, like chemically, it actually gives you serotonin. It gives you happy feelings. So movement actually drives good feelings. Good feelings drives good thinking. So if you feel like you're stuck in a negative thought loop, start moving. Stop thinking and start moving. Start doing. Action is what's going to get you out of the negative thinking space. Take action even though it's scary. And when you do, you'll thank yourself and you're going to grow from it. And yes, it is scary, but do it regardless, because the phrase that I told myself when I first went into entrepreneurship, and these were the thinking is what was keeping me back, is like I found the sound bite that worked for me. I'm not saying this is the one's going to work for all of you. Is every time I was scared to do something, whenever I was in analysis paralysis, the thing that I said to myself that helped me have the courage to take action was, "You're not going to die from this." Because really, the only worst outcome in life is death. And so you're not going to die. Like, just do it. Even if it's scary, to have the courage to do it. And you're going to see how different this is going to transform the way you approach conversations and just really overcome the fear of those things that haven't been proven to be true. So what needs to change in our mindset so we can show up in sales conversations confident to achieve better results? It's movement. It's doing things even though they're scary, right? It's showing up to these kind of webinars, even though you're like, oh my God, I still feel a weird way about it, or I still think a weird way about it. At least you've already taken the first step, right? You've been courageous enough to show up to this. But let's talk about some other things that will help us really show up to conversations without feeling pushy, right? And so we do that by being pulley. And the only way we can do that is by understanding that this is one of the four cornerstones in our thinking philosophy. But when it comes to self-talk, is you do things for your reasons, not theirs. Oftentimes we worry too much about what others will think. If I do this, if I say this, if I record myself, what will they think? What will they say? Well, here's the reality. The only people ever think about most is themselves. So when you're sitting there thinking about like, oh my God, what will they say? What will they think? They don't care. All they care about is themselves. If you think you're self-conscious, everybody's self-conscious. That's a fact. So again, you just have to have this delusional confidence, is what I call it. Like you have to be inside your head, you have to be delusional that you're the shit, even though you may not have the evidence that you're the shit yet. But you're the shit, and that's it. Like I'm the shit, and that's it. Like who's gonna tell me I'm not the shit? In my head, I'm the shit. I'm the best. And maybe I don't have the evidence yet, but at least I'm the fact that I'm courageous enough to take the steps and the action to work on myself to become that. You that's the best way for you to take the best foot forward. So let's kind of finalize this concept. Is that in our 4-week boot camp, we talk a lot about mindset up front before we talk about sharing you the practical aspects, right? What are the magic words that you need to use? We can give you all the words in the world that you can leverage to try to get better at what you do. But if you're not in the right mental framework, with the right tonality, with the right level of curiosity, it's going to be harder for you to be successful at leveraging this language to influence your conversations. And one of the perspective changers that we'll share with you, we're not going to use as many examples, is that if you ask yourself, could it be possible? Whenever you're faced with some of these challenges around limited beliefs, what possibilities could you create out of that? And that's one of the aspects of the 4-week bootcamp that we'll cover, which later on we'll share more how that will help you shift your mindset so that you can feel good about showing up to sales conversations. So with that being said, Nicole, let me turn to you and let's talk about how do we ask questions to not feel pushy and feel more pulley.
Well, and this is really the secret. This is really the secret. Like if all of you saw the title, How to Sell Without Feeling Pushy, and that's why you showed up, then I'm about to drop that gold nugget right on your lap right here. This is how you sell without feeling pushy. You ask questions. So just imagine you're walking down the street and somebody falls off their bike right in front of you and they break their arm. What would you do? Go ahead and just type it in the chat real quick. Just imagine you're walking down the street, somebody right in front of you falls off their bike and breaks their arm. What would you do? Help them? What would you do? Help them? Call 911, ask if they need help, attend to them, says Javier. You'd help them because you could clearly see, Drew says comfort and call for help. There we go. Call in a professional. Exactly. You can clearly see that there is a situation that you can both agree needs to be addressed because there's a broken arm, right? You can see it, they can see it, you agree, let's give our attention to this problem. In a sales conversation, there is the equivalent of a broken arm, but you can't see it. So the importance in asking the right questions is when you ask the right questions, you're uncovering the equivalent of the broken arm because somebody has a problem. They have a challenge. They have something that they have not been able to figure out how to do that you, as the professional and the credible expert, have a way that can help them. And they know that, and that's why they're in a conversation with you. That's why they're entertaining a conversation with you. So your job is to ask the questions that reveal the broken arm. And when you stay curious and ask questions, what that does is it makes you interested in the other person. And it gets you to a place of agreement that, hey, this is something we might want to give our attention to. Or maybe it's not at the we stage yet. Maybe you're helping them realize that it's something that they are finally prepared to give their attention to. But if you don't ask the right questions, you'll never arrive at that realization for yourself, and neither will they. So here's the gold nugget I'm going to drop on your lap. You know the difference between influence and manipulation, because everybody signed up because they saw this title and they said, how do I sell without feeling pushy? I want to make more sales without feeling pushy. I feel like I'm being manipulative. I don't want to do that to people. So there's two things that you could be. You could be influential. You could be manipulative. The only difference between the two is integrity. And the way that you show up to influence a conversation instead of trying to strong arm a conversation and manipulate it is you ask questions. Because when you ask questions, you can't go wrong, because what you're doing is you're gathering context. You're understanding the person better. You're showing them that you care. And then you're leading towards this feeling of empathy where they're like, wow, this person gets me. They know me. They understand me. And so your offer of help to someone who broke their arm is because you both can clearly see the problem. Your ability to ask better questions is what allows you to both clearly see the problem without feeling like you're pushing them, like you're manipulating them. So ultimately, here's something that we want to remember is when we ask better questions, we're staying curious, we're showing them that we care, and we're revealing the problem. Because if there is no problem, then no solution is needed. Think about that. If you don't ask good questions in your sales conversation to uncover a problem, what you're trying to do is sell them something that they don't need. Nobody wants to buy something that they don't need. And what happens is it looks like a nice to have. It looks like, oh yeah, that looks cool, that looks great. But if you haven't uncovered the problem, if there isn't a pain that they're feeling in some area, then they're not going to move towards whatever your solution is. So there's this saying that I like to share, which is if you tell somebody that you have their solution, they'll tell you why they don't have the problem. If you take the time to understand their problem, they will trust you with the solution. The way that you take the time to understand their problem is ask better questions. The other thing that we want to be mindful of is so many people along the lines of like making your product, your service, your offer a nice to have. So many people try to embellish it. And Carlos is going to talk in a little bit about how to sell your value. But what happens is people, when they're trying to sell their value, they embellish what they're offering and they try to dress it up and make it look really nice. But you know what you really want to do? You want to eliminate no as an option. You want to make no something that just seems so ridiculous that if they were to stay in no, that it would be silly. And when you ask good questions, you're able to help them realize that they don't want to stay where they are. You're able to help them realize they have a broken arm somewhere in their life, in their business, whatever it is that you help them with, they have the equivalent of a broken arm. So we want to ask questions like, when was the last time you felt confident about this? When was the last time that you remember feeling successful with this? What do you understand about the real impact this can have? On a scale from 1 to 10, how much of a priority is this for you to do something about this? I'm hearing you say that this is a really, big challenge for you. How important is it to you to put, some resources towards this right now? You can ask questions to uncover it and then help them realize it's something that they want to give their attention to, because holy guacamole, it would be crazy if I didn't give my attention to that. It's a broken arm. And then the other thing that I think is really important is a lot of people in sales calls approach it as, I've got my agenda and I want to make a sale by the end. And the one thing that they forget is something I'm going to share with you right now, and I want you to write it down. They forget that people do things for their reasons. They forget that somebody is giving their time to you. Don't ever forget that if you're getting on a sales call with somebody, they're giving their time to you. Time is the most valuable thing that anyone can pay you with. And here's what you're failing to do. Most people are failing to find out why the other person is in the conversation. They're so busy worrying about how they're going to show up to the conversation, which is important. We just went through mindset. You want to make sure that you're showing up the right way to the conversation. But then can you actually take a moment and find out why the other person is there? And here's how I want you to do it. I want you to do something called pre-frame the conversation. Now, I have some resources. Reach out to me online. I'll be happy to share with you my instruction of how to pre-frame a conversation. But here, I'm going to share with you right now the one thing I want you to do when you pre-frame a conversation, find out why the other person is there. Because if you're not checking in with them and finding out why they're giving up their time to you to be in that conversation, you're missing a huge opportunity. And I want you to ask a question as simple as this. This is the importance of asking the right questions. I'm curious, what will make our conversation today beneficial for you? Or I'm curious, what will make our time together a success for you today? Help me understand in our conversation today, what will be important to you for us to accomplish? Those are all different ways to say, why are you here? Why are you willing to exchange your time with me? What is it about? Because here's the thing, when you show up to a conversation, they're not showing up because you gave them a free call. They're not showing up because they don't have the problem that you solve. They're showing up because on some level, whether it's big or small right now, on some level, they're like, oh, I think this person that can help me. I think I want some help with this. I don't think I want to stay where I am anymore. I do acknowledge that this is a problem that I want some level of support with, and I think this person can help me. Find that out at the beginning of the conversation. Why are you here? And instead of just
Nicole,
asking, why are you here? Say, what will make this a success for you? Carlos?
I just wanted to add, like, I mean, just imagine if you start the call with something like that, with the question, and could you rephrase it again, because I didn't have a chance to write it, is what's that first question in the
What will
pre-framing?
make our time together successful for you? What are you hoping to get out of our conversation today?
Does that sound salesy? I'm asking in the chat. Does that sound salesy? If that's the first question that you're asking in the call, and you're making it about them, not about you, does that sound salesy? No, right? It sounds like you are in service to them.
Yep.
So always start the call with what's on your mind, what would you like to accomplish, how do you feel like this would be the most helpful for you, right?
Yeah.
Like you're making it about them. You're already kicking it off. The first feeling that that customer will get from you is this person's here to help me, not this person's here to sell me something. And just one last note that I'll share is that I've asked a room of people when we did a sales conversation, and I asked the question, what do you feel is, when you think about like what makes a really, really good sales person? And I think that conventional like marketing and the way like movies and these like series and all these things has been marketed to us, most of the people that responded to that question, the response was someone who can talk a good game. And that is the most common misconception. To me, the definition of sales is not the one who can use this tool the best, but it's the one who can use these two the best, right? It's the power of listening. The person that has the best active listening skills always wins because you're there to draw out and to help, right? And that's the way you compete. That's the way you win, is by asking questions, staying curious, really listening and understanding, and helping the other side feel heard and feel seen. And then of course the better you understand their problem, as Nicole said earlier, the more they're going to trust you with the solution you're going to present. So sorry about that, Nicole. You inspired me to share a little note.
Oh, I love it. No sorries needed. That was great. That was really helpful for everybody to really understand. And I'm glad that you asked them the question, like, did that sound salesy? If you show up to a conversation, you're like, hey, help me understand how I can best support you in our conversation today. Hello, I'm here for you. I'm here to make sure that the time that we spend together is beneficial to you as well. I'm not just trying to sell you something. That sends a message that has a ripple effect that's so much stronger than just in that moment you asking the question. So that's what we're really doing, right? This is sales psychology. How do I show up and immediately be of service to that person? So I love that you added all of that in, Carlos. I think that that's really, really helpful. And I noticed in the chat, some of our clients are here. Kay is here. Kay has been doing a phenomenal job just seeing the importance of that micro moment at the beginning of a sales call where you pre-frame, and Kay, she can share with you, it's made a world of difference. Same thing with Mark. He's so dedicated, right? He's been in our last boot camp. He's joining our next one. He's really intentional about these micro moments and what a difference it's making in how he shows up to these sales conversations. So like we said, ask better questions. And when you ask better questions, the next point that I want to make is it helps you handle objections more gracefully. Because what happens when you ask questions? Well, first of all, the person in control of the conversation is the person asking the questions. Carlos just made a really, really powerful point that most people think if we're talking, we're good communicators. Listening is communication. Listening, if you're a good listener, you're gathering context. And guess what everybody loves to talk about? Themselves. You're letting them feel a certain way, like you really care about them. And then when you get to the point of handling objections, you've gathered some context because you've asked good questions. You've understood why the person is there, why you're in that conversation. And it helps you handle objections and respond to them much more gracefully. Let me share something with you right now that I want you all to write down. Here's what an objection actually is. It's a buying signal. It's a buying signal. If somebody really didn't want it, they'd say no. They'd say, this doesn't sound like something I want. Let me give you a quick, silly example, but I think it's going to stick in your mind. If right now Carlos was like, hey, Nicole, I'm going to stab you in the eye with a fork. You know what I wouldn't say? I wouldn't be like, well, I don't know, Carlos, do you think it's going to hurt? Do you think I'd have to go to the hospital? Because I don't know if I have time to go to the hospital today. I don't know if it's the right time for me to go to the hospital and get my eye treated. Like I wouldn't start objecting. I'd be like, no, Carlos, don't stick a freaking fork in my eye, right? If people are super, super clear, this isn't for them, they're going to say, this isn't for me. They're not going to start asking questions. So when somebody asks you some questions, I know that that's probably a really ridiculous example, but hopefully now it's gotten your eyes on the right place, that an objection is a good thing. And when we've asked questions and we've really understood the person, then we're able to respond better because we know more about them. We understand more about them. And Carlos, I think you have something to share right here about handling objections.
Yeah, and I think like when we think about objections, right, it's like typically the most common ones we get is, what's your price, or why so expensive, or let me think about it, let me talk to my spouse. But objections usually generates a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of like that nervous energy, right? Because it's like, how do we respond to that? And what's really funny is that if we've done this long enough, they show up every single time, or at least every other call, right? And it's like, yet we still show up the same way, right? Because we haven't prepared to know exactly how to respond to it. But what happens to our heart rate? Does it increase or does it decrease when we're faced with an objection? And it increases typically, right? Because as our heart rate increases, so does our speaking pattern, and so does the way that we think, and we just start kind of getting discombobulated. So the best way to actually handle an objection is, rather than speeding up how to respond to it, is slowing down.
Yep.
And you slow down by staying curious rather than jumping into self-judgment mode. Oh my God, what am I gonna say? It's gonna sound wrong. And if I say it this way and that, and then you start negotiating with yourself. Like, how many times I've had people that have told me that sometimes I communicate the price, then I see their face, and as I see their face, I get nervous. So then I lower the price and I negotiate with myself, and I end up underselling. And it's like, why are you doing all that?
You cost yourself money.
Like, right? Like, you just negotiated with yourself. Who does that? But that's because we start getting nervous. Our heart rates start getting up. So observe yourself during these moments of objections. And is that happening to you? Are you getting nervous? And if you just be conscious about during those moments to just slow down, and then imagine if you had the right set of words you can say, or the right question you can ask, rather than responding with an answer when they say, why are you so expensive? Instead, you can respond with a question. Hey, well, just out of curiosity, what's your experience in working with a professional sales coach with me in the past? Or what other experience have you had working with coaches? Or what budgets have you leveraged in the past? And you've gained context. They might say something like, well, I used another coaching program and it was blank, blank, and blank. And you start realizing that they're comparing you to something that's nowhere relevant or related to the value of the services or the results that you can provide them. With that context, you feel more confident and comfortable in handling that objection. But you can only get to that if you just slow down, stay curious, and ask questions. Because as Nicole said, the person that asks the question controls the conversation. And that's why our emotions get hijacked. Because we let them continue to ask you the questions. We feel compelled to give them an answer. So,
and I think one of the things that is really important too is we can't take the objections personally, because they have nothing to do with us. They don't have anything to do with us. And doing the work so that we can be unattached to the outcome is one of the best ways to, number one, not take it personally. Number two, to handle objections better. And there's some things that you can do to make sure that you, when someone gives you an objection, aren't handling it defensively. And one of the best ways to do that is to stay curious. Like the other day, I was talking to somebody and they were worried about the budget conversation. And the person that they were in a conversation with said, I don't think we have the budget for this. And they said, how do I respond to that? And I said, well, why don't you get a little bit curious and say something like, don't worry, most people don't have a budget to do something that they haven't yet done or that they haven't done before. I'm curious, what would need to happen for you to create a budget for this? Don't go, oh my God, it means that they just told me that I'm too expensive. It means that my pricing is wrong. We take it personally and we make it about us, when really, if we just stay curious and respond, maybe we can uncover some more context and get to know that person better, and maybe even reassure them. Don't worry, most people don't have a budget for something that they've never done before. I'm curious, knowing that this is a priority for you, what would need to happen for you to create a budget for this? And now you're helping them sort through making a decision. Because what they didn't say is, I don't want to do this. They just said, I don't know if I have the budget for this. Great. How can you help them sort through making a decision to create the budget for that? That's really where we want to be. How can I stay curious? How can I help this person make a decision? And Carlos and I like to talk about something that we call with or without you energy. So how can you be in that moment from a place of service with or without you energy? I don't need you to say yes. I don't need to overcome this objection for me to feel good about myself or my business or anything else. I'm here to help you make the best decision for you. This or something better. That's what I always think. This or something better. Either this person knows that they want the help and they're ready to say yes, or there's something better coming along. But I know that I'm not going to take this personally. I'm here to just help this person decide what's best for them. And that's where I'm going to position myself in this conversation, with or without you energy.
And that's a phrase that's coined. I want to give credit where credit's due. I heard it first from Daniel Priestley. What it just means is that when you are so bought in your mission, that you know for a fact that what you do is there to help people, that it's going to impact things for the better. And when you believe so much in yourself and your ability to solve problems, and your qualification to have the technical knowledge, expertise, whatever that means, to be able to accomplish that outcome that the clients, and if you can transfer that energy with confidence but not arrogance, that's the energy that you want to show up in, right? It's like, so what would you like to do now? And if they say, well, let me think about it. I was like, well, just out of curiosity, what is it that you need to think about? Well, the budget seems a little bit high for me. Well, what would be a budget that would make sense for you? Well, probably somewhere close to that. Well, I'm sorry, it just can't make any business sense to be able to work that. And then if it just ends there, then they're just like, well, I guess there's nothing we can do. All right, well, if you change your mind, if something changes, I'm here for you. Thanks for the opportunity. And you move the F forward. Like, don't get nervous and undercut your own value. Like, you have to double down on what your price is and what it is that your service, the value of the service that it is. But be able to do that with confidence and get enough reps to do that. Your clients will feel like, oh, like once they go shop around or talk to their wife or wait till the problem gets worse, then they come back to you, right? They realize that they were wrong in the first place. They'll come back to you if they come back to you. And if they don't, then that's not the kind of client you want. That's the other thing. It's like, not every single sales opportunity is meant to be a client for you. Not every client is a fit for you, just like you're not a fit for every client, right? And just be okay with that, right? Go ahead, Nicole.
One last thing that I just want to share about asking better questions, right? Because we've said, hey, one of the ways to sell without feeling pushy is to ask better questions. Well, in the example that Carlos just gave you, a lot of us have gotten to that point where somebody says, oh, I don't know if I have the budget. And it's kind of like, how could I have handled that differently? Well, how could we build the case to help them see that they don't have the budget not to do this? And one of the things that Carlos and I are really intentional about teaching in our boot camp that we have coming up later this month is we help people understand where to ask the questions in the conversation. Because if you've uncovered context for that person that helps them see the money they're losing by not making this decision. This is what I was talking about earlier, by embellishing yes versus destroying the option of no. If you have asked questions that we teach you how to ask in our boot camp that reveal that that person is losing a certain amount of money by not addressing the problem, all of a sudden the budget conversation sounds ridiculous. They're like, I'm losing $7,000 a month by not doing something about this, but I don't know if I have the budget to pay you $2,000. What? Right? Doesn't that almost seem so ridiculous? But the person that can do that is you, and you have to do it earlier in the conversation by asking some questions, so that, I like to say, handle objections before they handle you. Why are we waiting until the moment that somebody says something to us to go? It's like one of the things that Carlos and I teach, and I've always taught my clients, is let's find out at the very beginning of the call if there's another person involved. Why are we going to wait until the end of the call when somebody says, I need to go check with my husband, I need to go check with my business partner? Why are we waiting? Let's find out at the very beginning. Hey, if what we discussed today sounds like it might work for you, who else in your world does this decision impact? Let's find out at the very beginning if there's somebody that might make an appearance at the end of the call, so that we're not surprised. So I think that's really, really important, is understanding that asking those questions is what allows you to handle the objections.
Real quick, Nicole, I want to do a quick commercial. So you've enjoyed this so far, right? We're 47 minutes into the call. The good news is that Nicole and I have a 4-week boot camp. We have some of our grads here. So I want to give a shout out to, I believe Mark is here. I know that Shuba is going to be joining us on our next cohort. It starts on August 20th. It's going to be at 2 o'clock East. It's typically $4.99, but because you decided to be here, have the courage to show up to this webinar, we want to give you a special coupon code. For those who actually showed up to the webinar, you get rewarded with a $100 special price off. It'll be $3.99. It's going to be 4 weeks. It's about an hour and a half per session. And we go over the magic words. We go over the mindset. We go over answering your questions around, like, what happens with this objection? How do I overcome that? And how to close deals and how to apply to get those results immediately. So I shared the link and the code in the chat as well. But on to our regular scheduled programming, I just want to offer that because I know that some folks tend to drop off a few minutes prior. So the next piece that we want to talk about is, how do you communicate your value? Well, the way that you communicate your value is exactly through what Nicole was sharing. If you ask the right questions and you can uncover the evidence and their reasons. One of the things we keep on saying is that people do things for their reasons. The better you understand their reasons, the better you can understand how much they value, why they think they need your services, right? And so some questions that Nicole asked earlier is, how important is it to you? When someone can assign a value from a level 1 to 10, how important something is, that's one way you can actually quantify value. You could also say, how would you feel if? So how would you feel if you were to hire me? And 6 months from now, 1 year from now, you get the results that you wanted. What needed to have happened? Now the person is self-discovering how you communicate your value. And then the next thing is, how do you ask what are called implication questions? What would be the impact if you were to hire me today, and let's say everything works exactly as we designed it to work? What would be the outcomes that you would get as a result of it? Well, if you help me get my home, well, let's use the real estate, because I just saw real estate as an example, right? You help me get my home at a better deal. It helped me get into save all this money that I've been spending on renting and build equity, and help my family and my kids get into school, and what else, and what else, and what else. And all of these things are sometimes not quantifiable value, like actual savings of money or money that you're going to make them, but it can be value to them, the perception of value to them, because it's about their reasons, right? Because what they value is being able to have a secure future for their children. What they value is being able to move to a home where they can feel like their kids can grow up in and have lasting memories, right? So the better you understand their reasons, the better you can quantify or even qualify what those reasons are and be able to assign a level of value to them. So you communicate value by staying curious, asking questions, and ask value-based questions. Value-based questions are less fact-finding, and it's more, how would you feel if, how do you feel about now, and how would you feel about later, right? Like getting them to assign a level of value and really assign their emotional value behind whatever problem or outcome needs to get solved. And then lastly, let's say you get through asking the questions, you got your mindset intact, you got the objections you were able to handle gracefully, and you were able to communicate the value of your services. What happens next is that you literally just say, so based on our conversation, it sounds like this is going to make sense to you. What happens next is I'm going to send you a proposal, or I'm going to send you a link for you to make your deposit, or I'm going to send you the contract for us to start the engagement on this day. And be as simple as that. People want to know what happens next out of every conversation, right? Like we're doing all this stuff, right? Nicole and I are doing this stuff. We're giving you the steps to what happens next. What happens next is if you're the kind of person that feels like wants to invest into their growth, into their sales success, then what happens next is maybe a 4-week sales conversion bootcamp would be the right thing. So you see how smooth that was, right? That transition. So I want you to apply that same concept with your customers is if you're ready to land the plane, all you just need to say is the magic words, what happens next is. And just be ready to know what to actually say, what does happen next. You better have a process, right? Like don't wing it. Don't be like, I'll just send you an email sometime in the next 3 to 6 days. You want to be very specific about what they should expect and make sure you deliver exactly what you said you were going to deliver, because that's a big credibility builder or a credibility crusher. Right? If you're going to make a commitment of what you're going to do next, you better support it. You better back it up. So, Nicole, anything you want to add to that aspect of closing with confidence?
Yeah, I think it's still back to the selling is serving. Like when we close with confidence, what we're really doing in closing a deal is we're just asking somebody to make a decision. That could be yes, that could be no. But the decisiveness around making a decision is what we want to encourage. Remember, we're there with or without you. We're not going to take it personal. Nothing's gone wrong if they decide that it's not the right time for them to move forward with this. That is still of highest service to them. If you've helped them get to a point of clarity where they've realized, now isn't the time for me to put my energy, my investment, whatever, towards this. They benefit because now they know it's not something that they want to address right now. You benefit because Carlos said this earlier, move on. There's somebody out there who is ready to say yes. Our job is not to control, because we can't control when people are ready to buy. There are now, soon, and later buyers. Our job is to help them get to a point of clarity. Do I want to address this now, or is this something that I want to put off? And either way, we've helped them make a decision. And that's where we can close with confidence, because what we're not doing is saying, oh, I need this to turn into a client. I need them to say yes to me for this to feel like a success. Remember, selling is service. Are you getting on that call to help them become a better version of themselves by the end of the call? Because you getting them to a point of clarity is that. If you leave somebody at the end of the call in maybe land, what you've done is you've just spent 30 minutes with somebody and you've dropped them off at the same damn place that they were at when you started the conversation. If you've helped them get to a level of clarity of like, ooh, I do want to do something about this now, or no, I don't, you've served them. So closing with confidence, it's still about serving them and helping people get to a point of clarity of what they'd like to do next. And sometimes what they'd like to do next is pay you money and work with you. And sometimes what they'd like to do next is put this off for another time. But at least you have that clarity, and so do they.
Great. So we're going to actually open it up. We got a few minutes to open up for Q&A. We did have a question up here, and I'm going to try to understand it as best as I could. Not sure if Ahmed is still here. If you want to add clarity to the question, Ahmed, in the chat. But if I want a customer to offer him a service, but because lack of experience, I couldn't manage to make it and found other. Yeah, I don't quite understand. Not sure if you can interpret this question, but I'm guessing that maybe the limitation here is that you're feeling challenged to offer him a service because you feel like internally you may not have enough of the experience to actually do it. If I'm interpreting that question correctly, then I would just say do it for free and learn how to do it the right way and earn the business. Like if it's not fair to the client that on their dime you're going to learn how to do the thing that of a service that you're offering if you don't have experience doing it, right? And being honest and hey, look, this seems to be like something outside of my natural area of expertise, but in the spirit of me learning how to figure it out for you, um, I'll do it for you at no cost, just so that. But in return, I would ask that you give me feedback around it so that I can see how I can offer this as part of my service in some future. I'll give you 30 days of support in doing it. If we can figure it out within the 30 days, then we'll talk about some sort of paid engagement. So hopefully that kind of semi answers that question. That's something that I've done for my clients before, and they feel so obligated to like pay me something later on or hire me for other things. And what I've done is I haven't said yes to something I'm not experienced to be able to solve. And then on their dime, I'm trying to solve the problem. That's unfair to the client. So that would be my personal philosophy around that. I don't know what you would add to that, Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have the experience, what we always want to do is be in integrity. What we always want to do is be transparent, because we want to build trust. Trust is where people feel safe and comfortable with us and want to buy from us. You could say, hey, that's, not something that I've done before. It's not, would it help if I could make a recommendation to where you could get something like that, that kind of service? The other thing you could do is say, hey, I'm going to be fully honest with you. That's not something that I have taken on yet as a project. Would it help if I could offer you a whatever rate, a beta rate, and that would give me the experience to kind of work through it and could save you some money on getting, like, you could still make an offer if it's something that you wanted to do, but be transparent about it. Like, hey, this isn't something that I've ever done. Would you be open-minded about us doing it together if I gave you a bonus rate for it, knowing that this would be my first time taking something like this on? Just be honest if you do decide to offer something to somebody, and make sure it's still in your wheelhouse. Like, don't be doing something that you don't have any experience in, but that's still an option that you could give to get some experience. Just be open and upfront. And I know we had another question that Shuba had asked, and she asked if you're being manipulative if you tell them about the money that they might lose. Could it be possible that you're actually being manipulative if you don't help them realize that there's a blind spot somewhere? You're not saying, hey, you're losing all this money, you better pay me to work with me. That should never be your approach. It's, hey, there's some holes, it looks like, in your business. Is this something that you feel like you might want to do something about? Yeah, it's probably something I should do something about so I don't keep losing money. Well, listen, would it help if I made some recommendations that I think could be beneficial for you, knowing that, I've helped some other people in that position? Yeah, I'll take some recommendations. Okay, cool. Here, I think you could start with this and start with this. And in the spirit of accountability, is this something you feel like you want to navigate on your own, or would you be looking for some support with this? Like that's just an easy way to say, hey, you got some things going on. You might want to address it. Do you feel like it could be a benefit for you to address it? Yeah, I think I do. Would it help if I could make some recommendations for you? Make some recommendations of things that they can get started on right now. And if they feel like they want to go run with it and try it on their own, cool. If they feel like, oh, I'm not quite sure how to do that, great. Would it help if I shared with you some of the ways that I've helped some other clients in that same position?
I would
So you're
also
saying,
challenge
sorry, go ahead,
that.
Carlos.
Sorry, to your comment that it would be manipulative not to. I would also just say it would be a disservice to them
Mhm.
if you
Yeah.
didn't communicate the potential impact of not taking action, right? Like, hey, just to let you know, in my experience, I've had folks be in your shoes, just like you are right now, where you are. And those who have decided to work with me, these are some of the outcomes they've gotten. I'm not saying that that's going to be the exact outcome you had, but the good news is that, in my experience, this is something that you should look to expect with working together. But counter to that, I've had an example of a customer who decided to not make that decision, and they waited, and because of it, here was the impact, right? So you can offer the gain and you can offer the loss, but psychologically speaking, most people move more, they're motivated more by loss aversion, the FOMO effect, as you know, right? Like you see it everywhere in the marketing when people say we only have one ticket left to whatever, or 24 hours left, or by end of today, the sale ends now. People out of FOMO actually make that impulsive decision. And I'm not saying you want to use that in any manipulative way, as Nicole said, but truly, if your calendar and your capacity may not have the ability, you may want to impress upon them that, not making decisions, you're basically, it has a cost, right? Not making the decision to move now is a cost, right? You're leaving money on the table, or you're going to continue to have the problem that you have. You're going to continue to have the negative impact that you're having. You're going to continue to feel bad about the thing that you haven't decided to fix. So I think it's an injustice to the client if we don't even communicate the impact of not taking action, the consequence of not taking action.
Yeah. I think that we have to remember that the decision is always up to the other person. We're not here, we can't control them. We can't decide for them. But if we're not giving them the option, if we're not showing them, what came to mind as Carlos was talking is many years ago, I had an eye doctor who was doing an eye exam, and she saw something on the very back of my eye. It was a tiny little spot. It was not something that was dangerous or in any way was going to hurt me in that moment. But she said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know there's something that I saw. I'm not a optician or whatever they call themselves. I don't know what an eye doctor is, but whatever she said, there's a spot on your eye. This could be caused by stress. It could be caused by this, that, or the other. Just wanted you to be aware of it so that in future eye exams, as you get, checked out, that's something that you can just keep in mind." I mean, what if she hadn't said that? Now, every time I go get an eye exam, I'm like, hey, there's this spot when you check, because not every doctor is necessarily going to check for that. Not every doctor, and it would be the equivalent if you went to a doctor and they saw something in one of your cells that they were like, ooh, it's not a problem right now, but down the road it could be. Here's some things that you could start doing right now to make sure that it doesn't become a problem. That's really all you're doing. You're saying, hey, could I make some recommendations? It looks like there's some things going on in your business or in your world or in your life that might be bringing some repercussions. Would it help if I shared some things that I've seen other people do in that same position? And if they decide that they want to do it with you or want to take steps towards getting support with you, cool. But either way, you've helped them understand that there might be something that they want to give their attention to. And to me, it would be out of integrity to not share that with somebody, to not bring that up to somebody. I had a doctor do it a few years ago with my back. She said, hey, if you don't do something about this now, eventually you're going to need back surgery. So I decided to do something about it then. And all we're doing is giving people the option to make a decision. That's it. You're saying, hey, here's what's going on. Do you want to do something about this? Cool. I can make some recommendations, or we could do this together if it's something that you feel could be a good fit.
Fantastic. Well, folks, thanks for joining us today. We went a little bit over our time. There is a Q&A left unsaid. We won't forget about you, Javier, but the good news is that Nicole and I are available if you want to email us with whatever questions kind of came lingering, you want to ask us one-on-one. But again, if you want to have an opportunity to join a group, or you want to work on yourself and truly transform the way you have conversations so you can get better sales results, join us in the boot camp. You won't regret it. We had a student recently graduate the cohort, and he ended up closing $6,000 of new business just because he changed a few little words in his conversations. And he changed his mindset a little bit around how to approach conversations. And going back to Nicole's reference, rather than looking for a brand new client, all they did is tap into the existing conversations they had, and they revived a few of them. And because of it, just little tweaks that turned into $6,000 of new business opportunities. So we hope to achieve that for you. Is this investment is going to give you multiples in returns, and hopefully it opens the door to possibilities so that you can show up the conversations with sustainable success in your sales. So email me or DM us via Instagram or however you want with any lingering questions that we were not able to answer, and we're happy to be of service to you. And if you're joining our bootcamp, then we'll see you on August 20th. If not, keep hanging out with us. We got a bunch of other events that we've got coming up leading up to the boot camp. And thanks everyone for being here, and wishing you a wonderful afternoon and happy selling. Take
Happy
care.
selling.